I'm Katie Couric. The deadly skies over Iraq. Another U.S. chopper shot down. 5 helicopters lost in less than 3 weeks as insurgents take their attacks to the air. Fall from grace.
We were all shocked by what we heard coming out of Florida.
The astronaut charged with attempted murder returns home as NASA takes a hard look at how it screens the people it sends into space. And the American spirit, a billionaire mathematician who says better teachers equal a more competitive America. What gave you sort of the moral gut check to say, I have to do something about this?
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. As if it weren't already dangerous enough for U.S. forces in Iraq, insurgents are apparently getting much better at shooting down American aircraft at a time when the military is relying increasingly on choppers. 5 helicopters have gone down in less than 3 weeks, all from enemy fire. The latest happened today. 7 Marines died when their transport helicopter crashed in a ball of fire. Our chief foreign correspondent, Lara Logan, has exclusive details on this latest attack.
Burning wreckage in an open field northwest of Baghdad marked the spot where 7 U.S. service members lost their lives today. CBS News has learned that their transport helicopter was shot down during what the military called routine operations. But before the U.S. could announce the cause of the crash, a jihadi website linked to al-Qaeda was already declaring victory. It said, quote, the Air Defense Division of the Islamic State of Iraq has succeeded in shooting down and completely burning a Chinook helicopter. There was no way to verify their claim, but the same group posted this video on the internet last weekend, boasting they shot down a U.S. attack helicopter close to Baghdad. Bismillah. By the time this group announced a campaign to deny the U.S. access to the skies over Iraq, 4 U.S. helicopters had been shot down in just 2 weeks. The first, on January 20th, was a Black Hawk, with all 12 on board killed. 3 days later, 4 security contractors died when their chopper crashed after coming under fire. Then on January 28th, an Apache attack helicopter flying close air support was hit during fighting in the south of Iraq, killing the 2-man crew. And on February 2nd, 2 more soldiers died when enemy fire brought their chopper down northwest of Baghdad.
It's important to note that there's no emerging threat that we haven't seen on the battlefield before.
America's enemies in Iraq know that the U.S. military machine relies heavily on helicopters. It's considered so dangerous to travel by road that troops and cargo move mostly by air. Last week, we were flown on an 8-minute chopper ride just to get from one part of Baghdad to another. The U.S. military has not said exactly what type of fire brought their choppers down, but weapons used in the past include heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles, rocket-propelled grenades, and even machine guns. Lara Logan, CBS News, Baghdad.
Now to the story that's proved to be such an embarrassment for NASA. Astronaut Lisa Nowak returned home today wearing a tracking device on her ankle. She's charged with trying to kill another astronaut's girlfriend. As Sharon Alfonsi tells us, the episode has prompted some soul-searching at the space agency and a media frenzy.
Even if astronaut Lisa Nowak could go to the dark side of the moon, chances are a camera would be there waiting for her. At her Houston home today, there were enough satellites to rival the space station. But she was at the Johnson Space Center, where doctors performed an evaluation of the 43-year-old.
This is a very difficult time for many people.
NASA officials wouldn't comment specifically on Nowak's case, but announced that in light of her situation, they're now reviewing the selection process for all astronauts and the amount of screening they get after they're chosen. Right now, there's no annual psychological review.
It's a trait that we're taught from the beginning of our training. You put personal things aside. We're also taught to look out for one another.
And a trait Nowak admitted to being good at as a wife and mother of 3 headed to space last July.
We're very, very excited, and especially for me on my first time. I can't wait to go.
Now she's charged with trying to kidnap and kill Colleen Shipman, who police say she viewed as a romantic rival for another astronaut's affections. In this request for a restraining order filed after the attack, Shipman wrote Nowak had been stalking her for 2 months, and police say she had printed directions to Shipman's house 13 days before her drive to Florida.
The big question mark is what was going on in the mind of astronaut Nowak. Whether she was a wannabe stalker or a wannabe killer with a premeditated plan is very difficult to determine.
NASA now finds itself wrestling with equally weighty issues.
Was there something that we missed along the way? Can we make improvements to our procedures and policies? We don't see something, but that's why we're embarking on this process.
Meantime, NASA's put Nowak on 30 days paid leave and removed her from her mission duties. Katie?
Sharon, are experts saying how someone so accomplished and disciplined could have unraveled this way?
Well, we actually spoke to a criminal profiler today, and she said, listen, she was focused, almost obsessed about her job by all reports, so it's not surprising that she'd be the same way in her personal life.
Sharon Alfonsi. Sharon, thank you so much. Now to a story that has Washington buzzing tonight. At a time when they're cracking down on congressional perks, the new Speaker of the House is apparently asking for a big travel upgrade. Cheryl Atkinson reports from Capitol Hill.
Ever since 9/11, a small military jet like this has been made available to transport the Speaker of the House for security reasons. The Speaker is second in the line of succession to the presidency. Back then, it was Republican Dennis Hastert. Now it's Democrat Nancy Pelosi, but she may be getting a little more leg room. Speaker Pelosi is reportedly asking for a much bigger jet, a government version of the Boeing 757 that can make the trip between Washington and her San Francisco home without stopping to refuel. The Speaker's critics have dubbed it Pelosi 1. Military officials are said to be grumbling about it, and the Speaker finds herself on the defensive. Today, she insisted size doesn't really matter.
It's not a question of size, it's a question of distance. We want an aircraft that can reach California.
But an aircraft like that can comfortably seat 50, and Republican leader Roy Blunt is among those questioning how all those extra seats might get filled.
And, you know, if you can say to your supporters, do you want to fly with me from San Francisco this week, spend the week in New York, and then fly with me back, that's an incredible perk. It's an incredible fundraising tool.
Pelosi's office told us she'll follow all the appropriate guidelines. Problem is there aren't any yet. Because of the flack, the Defense Department is now said to be quickly writing rules for the Speaker's plane, everything from size to who can go along for the ride. Katie?
Cheryl Atkinson on Capitol Hill tonight. The prosecution called its final witness today in the trial of Vice President Cheney's former aide, Louis Scooter Libby. Libby is accused of lying under oath about the leak of a CIA operative's name to reporters. National political correspondent Gloria Borger brings us up to date on the trial that has Washington insiders riveted and the rest of us scratching our heads.
The courtroom testimony so far has provided a rare view inside a White House under fire during the lead-up to the war in Iraq. It's not pretty. Top advisors squabbling in the West Wing, leaked secrets, faulty memories, all part of a full-blown damage control operation apparently led by the vice president himself. Scooter Libby, on trial for lying, was the vice president's top man. And he told a grand jury the boss was not happy.
I'm sure he was upset. I don't recall the conversation all that clearly, but I'm sure he was upset.
What rattled Cheney was this article in July 2003, attacking the administration's rationale for war that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. It was written by Ambassador Joe Wilson, who was sent to Africa by the CIA to see if Saddam was buying the ingredients there to make a nuclear weapon. His answer, no. Cheney was furious. He wanted Wilson discredited. He knew that his wife, Valerie Plame, worked at the CIA. On a clipping of Wilson's column, he wrote, "Did his wife send him on a junket?" Here's where the memories get fuzzy. Libby now says Cheney was the first one to tell him about Plame, but he simply forgot. He thought he heard it first from reporter Tim Russert, but after checking his notes, he went to Cheney, who hardly reacted.
Indeed, anytime tell you, well, you didn't learn it from Tim Russert, you learned it from me. Remember back in June, you and I had talked about the wife working at the CIA? No.
Today, Russert denied in court that he ever spoke about the CIA agent in a conversation with Libby. He said it was more of a viewer complaint call. Russert said, if I had been told that, I would have remembered it. Vice President Cheney could take the stand in Libby's defense, but he may also need to answer some questions about himself and whether he directly controlled a White House effort to discredit a political enemy. Katie.
Gloria Borger in Washington. Thank you, Gloria. And some possible good news for dieters tonight. For the first time, the FDA has approved an over-the-counter weight loss drug called Ally, which works by blocking fat absorption. It's not a magic pill. It's meant to be used along with diet and exercise, and there can be gastrointestinal side effects. There's much more CBS News ahead. Coming up next, the American spirit. Our kids are falling behind in math and science. Meet the billionaire mathematician who's got a formula for changing that. And later on, what's in a name? Ford brings back an old standby, and they're feeling pretty bullish. We'll explain. CBS News in Focus. This week, we're bringing you an ongoing series called The American Spirit, innovative approaches to some of our biggest problems. Tonight, the math and science gap. Simply put, we're losing ground. A recent study compared high school students in 29 developed nations. Guess where American students ranked? 16th in science and 24th in math. But a billionaire businessman thinks he has a plan that adds up. His story is tonight's example of the American spirit. Can America compete with China and India when fewer and fewer of our students graduate with math, science, and engineering degrees?
We got adding and subtracting.
This man sure doesn't think so, and if he's worried about it, you probably should be too.
We have an economy that's dependent on technology, and we don't have a domestic workforce who's prepared. Fewer and fewer people who know math and science teach math and science.
Not only do they not have enough math teachers, but the ones they have aren't sufficiently qualified.
Oh yeah, that's the whole point. You like this job, right?
Jim Simons sure likes his job as head of a hedge fund called Renaissance Technologies. And this world-renowned mathematician turned college professor turned billionaire businessman is still passionate about numbers. What were you doing? Is this what you do to pass the time?
Well, I've been actually working on a math problem in the last couple of years, so this is part of that.
Last couple of years?
Yeah, it takes a couple of years to solve a good problem.
Whatever floats your boat, Jim. If he hasn't figured out how to solve this problem,
we have x equals 7.
He does think he's got the equation for getting more math teachers into New York City public schools. Find college graduates who love math, pay for them to get their master's degrees, and in addition to their regular salaries, pay them as much as $20,000 more a year.
We don't want volunteers. We want people who will be committed to be a professional in this field and stay there. Now, a $20,000 bump is not all that much money, but on the other hand, it's meaningful and it makes people feel recognized.
It's called Math for America, and Simons put up almost $50 million of his own money to start it back in 2004. The goal? Getting 400 highly qualified math teachers in the classroom by 2009. What gave you sort of the moral gut check to say, I have to do something about this?
I've made a lot of money, had a very interesting life, so for me to make a modest contribution of time and money to try to get things turned around doesn't seem very surprising.
It's a modest contribution of time and money, but it's also the ability to draw attention and be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to be, a squeaky wheel.
How many people, Jim, have you been able to entice into this program so far?
Oh, well, we're bringing in 50 a year. I mean, these are guys who graduated from MIT and Harvard.
And gals.
Yeah, in fact, half of them are gals.
What was the probability of me rolling double sixes?
Melanie Smith is one of Jim Simons' gals. While most of her friends from Columbia University pursued careers in finance, Melanie, who majored in math, started teaching.
18 of these numbers are even.
I really wanted to do something when I graduated that had a tangible effect on where our country was going. And I felt that teaching was kind of the most powerful way to do that.
How could we use theoretical probability?
If something isn't done, do you think that the United States will lose its position in the global economy?
Oh, without question. Because it's the intellectual power of America that gives us the potential to stay in front. At a certain point, we will not be able to maintain our innovative edge in an increasingly scientific and technological world, and we'll be left behind.
Not if Jim Simons has his way. He says we can stay on top if we invest in American brainpower by hiring teachers who can ignite the imaginations of the next generation of math lovers. Math for America, by the way, may go national. Supporters are working on a bill in Congress to implement it throughout the country. Tomorrow on The American Spirit, why do so many seniors end up in nursing homes when there is a less expensive alternative? We'll meet one woman who's helping mom and dad stay in the comfort of their own home. And coming up next on the CBS Evening News, they escaped the war in Iraq. Now these women are being forced to make another desperate choice. One part of the Iraq story that's not told very often is the terrible refugee crisis. Today, the UN reported nearly 1.8 million Iraqis have been forced to move to other parts of Iraq to escape the violence, and 2 million have fled to neighboring countries like Syria and Jordan. Many of those people, especially women, have been forced to make desperate choices just to stay alive. From Damascus, here's Elizabeth Palmer.
After midnight, the action on the Germana Strip on the edge of Damascus is just picking up. This may seem an unlikely place to look for war refugees from Iraq, but inside, beyond the musicians and the floor show, there they are, selling the only thing they have left of any value, their bodies. In these clubs, the waiters act as deal makers between clients and the Iraqi prostitutes. This is the Arab world, where a woman's honor means everything. The fact that so many Iraqi women refugees would turn to prostitution is a measure of their desperation. Suad fled the war for Damascus 2 years ago with a son to support.
For me, it is like being raped. There's no desire. It's something I have to do for the money.
They need money because refugees aren't allowed to hold down legitimate jobs in Syria. Some prostitutes, unwilling to be seen in clubs, work discreetly out of apartments in the cramped Iraqi refugee ghettos of Damascus. They have no choice, explains May Barazai of the United Nations, because they've lost their husbands or fathers in the war.
Many of women head of households that they had to become prostitutes. They're the only income providers to the family.
Like Farah, she left her family behind in Baghdad and dreads the day they find out where she is and what she's doing.
I would commit suicide if they found out, or my family would kill me. But there's no other solution. We are practically dead already.
The younger the flesh, the higher the price. Some of the Iraqi refugee prostitutes are still only in their early teens.
This isn't any life for a 15-year-old. She should be playing. I'm sure she feels dead inside. There is nobody to help these girls.
No one to help, but a growing stream of men from all over the Middle East eager to prey on the most desperate refugees from the war. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Damascus.
When the CBS Evening News continues, everything old is new again. Ford relaunches the Taurus. What drove them to do it? In the 1980s, the Ford Taurus was America's bestseller, but the car that replaced it, not so much. So today, Ford swallowed its pride and brought back the Taurus, the name anyway. Kelly Wallace found out that lots of companies are recycling these days.
I'm very proud to present to you the new 2008 Ford Taurus.
The Taurus, a modest family sedan if ever there was one, today made a glamour car comeback.
Your car is back, and it's better than ever.
Well, not exactly. Because in reality, Ford is simply slapping a new nameplate on its slow-selling 500 sedan, banking on the idea that familiarity breeds ka-ching. Ford's just the latest company going back to the future.
Volkswagen's underperforming Golf has now become the familiar old Rabbit. Singular Wireless is dropping that name and adopting the venerable AT&T brand. And other companies like Maytag are bringing back marketing icons of yesteryear.
You men have all volunteered to be Maytag repairmen.
Maytag is holding auditions for a 2007 comeback of its lonely repairman.
Why, really, are people going back to the old?
It's comforting. It's nice to remember the past because there were easier, simpler times.
This is a Westinghouse.
That's certainly what the folks at this Brooklyn company are banking on. They purchased rights to the Westinghouse name and since have tripled sales of their electrical products.
There are some pitfalls, though, aren't there?
There are, unfortunately. When you're working with a centuries-old brand name, we get lots of calls from people who have refrigerators that after 40 years have stopped working.
Back to Ford's trade the 500 in for a Taurus decision.
Would you be more willing to buy it with a new name?
Definitely.
Why?
Because it sounds sexier.
I think we can see through those sort of marketing tricks and techniques.
In the end, consumers will decide if a car by any other name still sells the same. Kelly Wallace, CBS News, New York.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Good night.
CBS News. See it now, anytime, anywhere.